well, this is going to sound a little crazy, but we're actually looking for a young veterinarian to go out on the road and represent the bank and teach people about business loans. And I was like, and you want me to do that?
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this episode of The Greatest Profession Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Asciuto. I'm recovering from something, and that's why I sound like a early 90s DJ announcing a top 40 hit. And here they are with their new hit, End of the Road, Boys to Men. This is actually my second time recording this intro because several days ago, I tried to record it before, and I sounded like this. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this episode of The Greatest Profession Podcast. As I'm recording this, I am recovering from some sort of illness that could only be derived from swallowing a sea urchin. That's what it feels like in the back of my throat. There's probably something stuck there, just a wad of masking tape and nails. So I thought, you know what? Let me do it again. This episode is going to be part one of a two-part conversation with Jess Trichel. Jess she has a very non-traditional path within the industry. She actually graduated from vet school early. She did a 3+1 program, so she was pretty, on the younger side when she graduated vet school. But then, she did an equine internship and then went and worked in the education and outreach component of Live Oak Bank. Live Oak Bank was basically a small business association lender. So they supported a lot of veterinary businesses. Veterinarians were kind of a big part of their catalog early on. And then her job was to kind of go out to vet schools and vet student events and all of that and try to teach them things about practice finance and really basically anything that could be a potentially useful skills for this whole new wave of new practice owners. I actually they had an externship where you could go for 2 weeks. This is where I met Seth Williams, who was previously on the podcast, and Carrie Mead, who was also previously on the podcast. We spent a couple of weeks and we did workshops about basically all of this stuff. And we learned practice valuation and all these things. And that was a type of experience and educational opportunity that just wasn't really offered in any other way or by other companies in the same way. So after I graduated, Live Oak Bank actually kind of changed up their portfolio in large part because of the way that SBA lending changed. So they just they're not really supporting that. They don't really have those programs in the same way. They don't have the veterinary portfolio in the same way, just because of the nature of banking. I guess banking changes like that, which is something that I didn't know before. But anyway, so a lot of us benefited from that. A lot of my cohort, and I would say maybe a couple of years on either side. And so and many of us have Jess specifically to thank for that. Since then. Actually, since the externship, we have remained close. She's the type of person that, if we have an idea or if one of us has an idea about, hey, this might change the veterinary landscape, we're going to call the other one. So I will say that there's a lot to these episodes. This is more applicable to the second episode than the first, but I will say that, kind of throughout, I found myself having to pause and re-listen to parts because I just feel like there's these big ideas and very specific references to, famous business books and things that just sort of fly by and we don't really spend a ton of time on them. So to really digest, the information. Anything that we bring up from, book perspectives or, specific, we talk about, certain authors and I business ideas and all that I will put in the show notes so you have them. If you go onto the website under the episode page, all of that stuff is going to be there for you, including links and all of that. And if you haven't been to the website yet, www.thegreatestprofession.com or tgppod.com. I own both of them because why not? TGP Pod. It's mostly because I have to consistently like check the website for errors. It's just easier for me to type in TGP Pod. It's for me. It really is. Anyway, so with all of that, here is part one of my conversation with Dr. Jess Trichel. Every time like you go into any conference or VBMA or whatever, just like a group of veterinarians who get together, like the LSU crowd is like the lively bunch.
We train hard. We're prepared. I think that was one of my favorite things though, was like in vet school you have, obviously undergrad, everybody's, there for reasons and they go to football games and stuff. But the vet school crowd, like they're like, I'm not going, the out of state people coming in and they're like, I'm not going to a football game. I'm not into this. And then by the end of vet school, they're like super into tailgating, like going to the games and like hardcore. They're like, I never went to a football game in undergrad. And then they're like diehard football fans by the time they leave. And I'm like, well played, well played.
Yeah. As it turns out, going to those football games, there's more to it than just the game itself. There's like the entire event of the weekend.
Oh, for sure. For sure. You would literally go to take tests on Friday and we would get kicked out of our parking lot because all the RVs were parking there on Friday morning.
You too?
Literally,
That's
you're
awesome.
like walking by people having a breakfast beer, going to take an exam, and you're just like, what is happening right now?
That's amazing. We had the same thing happen at UT. It's like, well, you can't actually use the facilities to study anatomy or whatever this weekend. Like, there's a football game, as if like those two things together made a complete argument.
We literally would go in. We would go in because the vet school is really like ideal location compared to the stadium, and so we would go in on Saturdays at like 9 in the morning and we would park, go upstairs and study for a couple hours, and then come down and tailgate so that you had ideal parking, you studied, and you got to go to the game. It was a great combination.
That's awesome. It wasn't until like the end of maybe it was my year, my first year, where they like figured out that like the vet students needed to come in, particularly the ones who worked in the hospital, because the hospital was right there too. And so, but like trying to tell the traffic people that was impossible. You're like trying to show this badge that they gave you at the dean gave you or whatever. You're like, let me in. And they're like, we're not going to let you in. You got to get routed over to main parking. So it was like,
I think I feel like I remember like if you were on call, you just like had to go in and wait it out. You might not actually do anything, but like you had to be there because you couldn't get in and out at certain hours.
Oh my God. And where was home again?
We grew up in West Monroe, Louisiana, Rednecks Central. We were of the Louisiana TV shows. We were the Duck Dynasty version, not the Swamp People version. So Northeast Louisiana. We had a camp growing up that was, it was, so again, I was in Louisiana. So the Mississippi River, as it's kind of winding its way through like Arkansas and Mississippi and Louisiana, there's a section of it that is very windy. And so at one point, they, to make it a shipping lane, went through and cut the narrow parts of the land to make it straight, which cut like the shipping times dramatically down. Well, what that did was create a series of islands along the Mississippi River. Anyway, our camp was on one of those islands, which if you've ever seen the movie Mud with Matthew McConaughey and Reese Witherspoon, that was like filmed in that area. So I was watching that movie and I was like, I know this landscape. Like it was weird because it has a very specific look to it. Anyway, we would go there for basically as soon as we got out of school holidays from the time I was like 5 all the way through high school. We would Thanksgiving, Christmas, we would just spend there. And you would literally take a little bitty ferry across the river and get on this island. It was about 5,000 acres, and there was about 30 families. Some of them owned more, some of them weren't used. But you didn't have like real good cell phone reception. So literally the world just melted away. Like you were just there kind of in this very present, in this very natural environment, in a very weirdly contained natural environment. So they would send us out on four wheelers, and we would leave, and we would come back for lunch, and then we'd go back out. And I mean, it was just this like horde of kids on four wheelers, riding around in the dirt, problem solving, getting stuck. I remember one time my brother, like, there was a sandbar where the river, when it would get low and it would make these big puddles, we'd go riding through them, whatever. Because, proper rednecks like we were. And I see my brother with this four-wheeler, and all of a sudden he just goes through the puddle, and then it just stays, and all I can see is like the handlebars and him like climbing out, and I'm like,
oh no,
we're gonna die. Our dad is literally gonna kill us. We don't make this. He just sunk a four-wheeler. He's gonna be so mad. So like this whole group of kids, we go, we like winch it out, we get it out. I mean, we're just like on the fly, like problem solving, and like, we know nothing about motors or anything.
Right,
we like take the seat off, we're like opening stuff, and like there's water in there. There's probably not supposed to be water in that thing. We, like flip the four-wheeler over. We leave it for like an hour to dry, and then we put it all back together, and then it worked.
Wow.
And mom was the word until later in life, and then we're like telling dad all these stories, and he's like, y'all did what? It's like, and I sold that thing to somebody under it was in good working condition. Well, it worked. But we had this like freedom and independence, and like again, but just like so much time in nature to sit and reflect and think, hours to yourself, just staring out the woods or the river or whatever. Mm-hmm. And so the kind of Christmas and New Year's tend to be a very like reflective time for me, kind of having been trained all those years to kind of unplug.
Were you always on the like I'm going to be a vet track, or was there ever a point where you were thinking about something else?
So it was kind of weird. I never thought I was, but everyone was always like, oh, you're going to be a vet. You're smart. You like animals. Like, you're going to vet school. And I was like, what? No, I mean, can I do something else? And so everybody just assumed I was going to vet school for years and years. And I was like, but I don't know. I was not that little kid that was like, oh, I want to grow up and be a vet. Like, I wanted to do a bunch of other crazy stuff. When I went to college, I was very undecided. After a year or so, I was thinking about like marketing and business, but I had gotten a scholarship actually, to do like the work study thing or whatever, where they pay you to be manual labor somewhere on campus, but you got to pick said place. And so I'd grown up with horses. I had always had animals. And I was like, college is probably not the first time away from home. I should probably have a horse in my life, or at least access to horses. And so I was like, equine hospital. Yes, you will pay me to brush and groom horses and lead them around and hold them. I am in. Sounds like a great college job. And so I started working at the vet school with no intention of actually pursuing it. I just wanted to brush a horse in between classes. And then I kind of found myself like gravitating towards the people there. Of like, when I was there, I was like, these are my people. And I distinctly remember sitting at like, there was, they invited us to like one of the barbecues or whatever that was happening, one of the, probably one that I participated in as a vet student. And like, of course, Louisiana, so they got to feed everybody with like big jambalaya thing. And I just remember sitting there being like, I belong here. Like, I feel very at home with these people. I don't know all these people. I don't know them, but I know that I feel like I belong here. And that was always kind of the sense that I got of like everything else I explored, whether it was pre-med or business or marketing. It just didn't have that same feeling of, these are my people. I don't know why. Yeah. And even all throughout vet school, it's very much sometimes like, I'm not sure what I'm doing here, but I know I'm supposed to be here. And it always is that way, even at like vet conferences, because, kind of my random path that I have taken. I've ended up at other conferences and other industries, and like, it's never the same fit. And so it's always this gravitational pull back to this profession.
Oh,
And that's
that's
how
really
it's always been for
interesting.
me. So I don't know. I don't know. It's weirdly always been about the people for me about going into veterinary medicine. Um, Obviously, and I remember writing in my personal statement of like, veterinary medicine is like a tool to help people and their animals,
Right.
and that the animals are this connection point for me being able to connect with people. There's something about the animals that do that.
I mean, I definitely feel that. It does feel like when you are, I mean, that's what they're doing, right? Like they're coming to you for help for this family member. They're very affected. Um, you know, the people are attached to their animals. They're like a part of the family, and so
Yeah,
that you
for sure.
can provide them, not only a service for that animal, but then also solace during that time, or joy if it's about like a new puppy visit or whatever the things that I don't know about with GP, but um, yeah, I could absolutely see that. It's a touch point, it's a connection point for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
Because it's interesting, because like surely there's many ways in this world that one can like interact with animals, right? And that people do. So I'm just like, it's veterinary medicine seems to be this sort of interesting center of the Venn diagram of like people who love and work with animals, and then like people who are you know into the sciences, and then want to become doctors in that way. And then like, there's like this middle bit that you seem to have like found your people
Yeah,
with.
yeah.
Huh.
And it was, and that's
I wonder what that
actually
is.
one of the things, like when people are like, "Oh, my kid wants to go to vet school," da da da, and I'm like, "All right, we need to have a conversation." And I'm like, "Do you want to go into veterinary medicine because you like animals and that's the driving force, or is it because you like animals and you like medicine?" Because I think that's the bit that people miss a lot is like, yes, you're doing animal stuff, but like you're doing medicine too, and
Right.
you really got to like the medicine part and the parts about medicine that come with that, and doing medicine that doesn't always work on animals, and can your emotions handle, um,
Right.
obviously it's great when everything goes well, but can you tolerate it when it doesn't go well and biology is not working in your favor and you can't fix it, because those are the ones that you take home at night, and if
Sure.
you can't swallow that, um, this might not be a
Yeah.
great fit of a career for you.
Well, and the
If you,
question is too, it's like how
yeah,
much can you know when you're a kid too? Or like going
yeah,
before you experience that, like how much can you actually know the answer to that question?
yeah. And that's
I don't
that's
know.
the bug I always try and put in young people's ear is like, how much do you like medicine too?
Right.
Because it is veterinary medicine. And if you just want to work with animals, there's tons of careers that touch the field that you can
Yeah.
work with animals and do things with animals or do things in the animal industry, um, that are animal adjacent as well.
Right.
But you
Right.
don't, it seems like kind of society and popular media kind of make that to be the only career in with animals is being a veterinarian, and I'm like,
Right.
there is more out there, fortunately. It is not the only thing, and so I think if as long as you're going into veterinary medicine because you love animals and you love medicine, you know
Yeah.
that is a key component as well. You can't forget the medical part,
Right.
that
Well, and then I mean
practicing
the whole
medicine.
yeah, and that is sort of that's applicable then for like the practicing clinical medicine part, but then there's like the whole flip side of it, which is the parts of veterinary medicine that are not clinical,
Yeah.
that are not sitting in especially small animal, right? I mean, like most of the time we think about it as a small animal veterinarian, or like maybe like the James Harriet type of, go out to your farm type. But like there's very few kids who like dream about becoming like a USDA, veterinarian or whatever. Or think about like the gen path part, like the general pathology stuff, or,
Yeah.
clinical pathology, diagnostic medicine. And like, that's all necessary too. Cause I'm just, yeah, I don't know. I mean, that's like a whole separate piece of it, but I'm always sort of curious about like how do we get people into this industry that are not like this very narrow, like this small piece of what veterinary medicine is perceived to be, um, as veterinarians.
Yeah,
But
well,
I don't know.
right, and it's funny because like I'm in life or some human asks me a medical question and I'm like, well, you're legally the only species I'm not allowed to treat. So, which is funny that they get to be called the real doctors when in fact we can treat everything except one species.
Right. That's
I
amazing.
feel like we're the real doctors here.
That's like the doctor version of, that photo where it's like this picture, and that, gosh, I'm blanking on which astronaut it was, but like there was a guy a long time ago who took a photo of the Earth, and he was like standing outside of it, and he's like, it's like every human that has ever existed is inside of this photo except for one, and it's like the one guy who's taking the photo. It's like that. It's like we can treat all of these things, or at least legally, except for that guy.
Except for that guy.
You touched on one thing I did want to ask. So you touched on, like, you were thinking about maybe going into like business when you went to undergrad. You're like, yeah, business marketing. Like, why was that the thought?
I don't know. um, I guess I liked something. I think the business part was the utility of it. I think I was more attracted to the marketing aspect.
I love that it wasn't like, yeah, and then I used to go down to grandfather's old steel mill and I saw, like, man, all these people depend on grandpa or whatever. It wasn't any of that. It was just like, I don't know. I mean, I don't know.
I think there was a conversation somewhere, but just knowing that, to kind of make it in the world, having an understanding of business is a important thing to know. Generally, no matter what profession you choose, the underlying part of professions generally is business in
Right.
some form or fashion. So I think it was just that kind of universality of it and practicality of it. The first major I had declared, I think it was marketing with a minor in business. And then I was like, well, I do remember this part. I was like, well, if I'm going to go to medicine, I'm going to go 4 more years of school. I might as well go to med school, not vet school. And, and then I tried to make that fit for like a semester. And then it was very much, and I had found myself even in my free time, like at colics that would show up, like I would go in and stay late, and like I was very much again just very pulled to the
Huh.
vet school experience or the vet experience as a whole, and I would just find myself there, staying late even if I wouldn't get paid or whatever, just to be there and to help and watch, and I don't know. And then I saw my first colic surgery, and that blew my mind. And I wouldn't shut up talking about how cool it was. And I do remember that my parents were coming in town that night, so I was late. And then I got there and I was just like word vomiting, like everything that happened. I was like, you wouldn't believe it. We knock it down, we flip it upside down. It's hanging at its feet, and then we cut it open, and just like stuff was coming out everywhere. It was amazing. And I think they were like, I think you might need to give this another look because you seem
Right.
really excited about all of this. So I think
Yeah.
that was around the time I was like, all right, again, inevitable. Okay, you're going to vet school.
That's wild too, because if you went to an undergrad that didn't have a vet school, I wonder, like, what would have happened. I wonder if you would have
Ooh,
like found
I've
those
never
same
thought about that.
experiences.
Who would I be?
So, that's awesome. So that, I mean, that kind of leads to, because eventually, you did go to vet school. You got
Yeah.
in. You went to the one that was right there. Did you apply to a bunch of them, or just the one?
No, because okay, so that realization happened somewhere in my sophomore year. I do remember that, and I then changed all my classes around. And LSU had one of the 3+1 programs where you can do
Right.
3 years of undergrad, 1 year of vet school, animal science degree, and you graduate technically with your bachelor's after your first year of vet school. And
Right.
I guess I'd done enough like basic stuff that I could be on that track. But of course, like everybody says, like, it takes at least twice to get into vet school kind of thing. So I
Right.
applied my third year thinking like, oh, this is just, I'm going through the motion, getting my application in. I'll have to apply next year. And
Right.
then I got in and I was like, like a dog caught its tail. Wait, this is not the plan.
Yeah.
Because I had a professor who she had kind of done an accelerated undergrad, and that was kind of one of her regrets that she went through it so fast, and so I was kind of like,
Oh, yeah.
I wasn't really planning on 3 years of undergrad, and I actually did hesitate, but then I found out a lot of other people that I had like a lot of classes with that had gotten in, and I was like, well, if I'm going to do vet school, I kind of want to do it with you guys.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
I
yeah, not for nothing. Like if you're going into
yeah,
this incredibly difficult time, having a cohort of individuals that have your back is very
yeah,
worthwhile.
and that you like. So
Yeah.
I was like, all right, and actually I found out some of like the scholarship money that our state had, that applied to, because it was still technically my undergrad degree, I could actually apply it towards vet school, which was helpful too. So
Oh,
all of those things fell in line. It was like, yep, you're going. Okay.
yeah. That's
So
amazing.
no, I didn't. That year I did not apply to, I
Sure.
don't think, anywhere else.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it was just LSU. But again, it
I
was
mean,
more
yeah,
of
that makes
a,
sense.
um, I was like, well, you got to do it once. And then
Right.
I thought my second time applying would be my real application.
Man, so you were super young when you were going through vet school.
Younger than average, but actually a couple of those people that I went through vet school, that they had done 2 years of undergrad, so they were even younger than
Oh
me.
my,
But we were definitely the younger bunch of the class for sure.
that's wild.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I started when I was 29, and I'm so thankful for the amount of time that I spent in the world that prepared me for vet school. Like I looked at, like, because we Tennessee had a 3+1 too, and there were, students who were a part of that. And it's like, gosh, you're so young. I was like marveled at their ability to like get through it. But so I mean, did you find
That's
it
so
mo-
funny
more
now,
diff
because like now that I've been out, like I go sit in even like CE lectures or any sort of lecture, and I'm like, how did I survive that school? Like, I can't pay attention to save my life. And I'm like, I used to sit in lectures for 8 hours a day, you know? And
Right. So did you find that it was an
I,
easy transition to like from undergrad to vet school then, or easy-esque?
easy-esque. I had taken some pretty challenging um, undergrad classes. I was in the honors college, and so I'd taken some kind of really ridiculous classes. And so,
Yeah.
um, you know, that were ridiculous classes that were kind of outside my comfort zone. And so, vet school was at least in the kind of domains that were there. I mean, the volume of it was the change and the difference.
Right.
And I remember having undergrad roommates that were like stressed out, and I'm like, oh, that's cute. You're taking like 14 hours. I'm taking 24. You can unload the dishwasher. It's fine. Like losing her mind over some exams, and like she had like one test, and I was like, cool, I have like two midterms and another test this week, like you can do this, I promise.
Yeah.
um
Wow.
she was
It's
losing her
wild.
shit, and I was just like, yeah, no, you don't get to lose your shit over that. You have
Yeah.
one test.
D did LSU track, or were you like, did you have like a general thing, or did you have to decide like large animal, small animal?
Not until clinics, and I went mixed
Okay.
because because it gave you the most amount of time, like on externships, and the ability to kind
Oh,
of, it was just well rounded in my opinion to be able to do that. So, and that truly
okay.
was. So during vet school, I was very interested in diagnostic imaging, and was, kind of very heavily looking at how to pursue a radiology residency at one point. But then once I took boards, I was like, I don't want to take any more board exams. I'm done. I don't want to do this anymore. I'm tired of
Yeah.
studying.
Yeah.
So that was kind of one
That's
of the deterrents. I also realized like I wanted to be out in the world. Like I very much like moving around, and even small animal practice, I struggle with the idea of like going to the same building every day.
right.
Like
Yeah.
I don't know, for like ad nauseum forever, I don't know, that just like for some reason I can't wrap my head around it. So I gravitated towards equine ambulatory was where I was headed.
Oh,
But I
nice.
knew I hadn't quite given up on the radiology residency thing yet, and so I had um, I've done this in vet school. Like I specifically early rotations. Two of the ones I prioritized were equine medicine and small animal. I literally bumped them up together. I was like, I need to rule out, and I need to know which direction I can go. I'm going for internship. And so I put them back to back, like equine. I was like, okay, great, that was awesome, that was fun. And then it was literally like a week on small animal medicine, and I was like, I will not survive a small animal rotating internship. This will not go well for me. So at that point, I like
Yeah.
changed all my externships to equine, and I mean, I had several already lined up, but any of the small animal ones, I just like canceled them basically
Yeah.
and pursued an equine internship. But I did go to a place that had an MRI and was very heavy diagnostics in case I did still want to go the radiology route after.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Yeah,
So then, and that's the place that you did your internship at, the one that you're
yeah,
talking about with MRI and all that.
yeah.
Very cool. So then at some point during that internship, I mean, you didn't end up doing equine. You are not an equine doctor. Right. So like, at some point, like, you kind of stopped doing that. Like what happened during, I suppose, like the internship period, or like did you just sort of, find something else that you were just like, yeah, I would rather do this?
Yes. So during that internship, so this was post 2008 recession. So, it was 2000. I graduated 2012, so we're talking like 2013 when I was wrapping up the internship year, and
Okay.
I was very much actively pursuing equine ambulatory jobs, but we were not in a shortage of veterinarians at that time. Getting
Mm-hmm.
jobs is a
Yeah.
lot more competitive, and I mean, there was just a handful of postings on AEP, and like, so it was very much a who you knew situation to get a job. And so, I'd gone through several rounds of, interviews, and I would get working interviews and stuff. And then somebody with like multiple internships would apply, and then you're like, well, I would hire them too. They have way more experience than I do.
Right. Right.
No brainer. And
Yeah.
so geographically, because I left Louisiana, my internship was actually up near Seattle. Um, and so I was out in the Pacific Northwest, and right, because in Louisiana, there was very much part of me that was like, practicing equine medicine here isn't much fun in August. Floating teeth is basically hell. But if you go somewhere where the weather is decent and not,
Yeah.
150 degrees and humidity of 110%, it's not
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
bad. I do enjoy it. So I was looking in the Pacific Northwest. I was kind of looking along the East Coast, Virginia, North Carolina. I was like, where's the
Mm.
weather temperate most of the year, not frigid cold. My
Right.
two
Right.
intern mates were from the very northern Midwest, Minnesota, Wisconsin, and I was like, no, that's too much winter for me. So I was definitely looking for a southern-ish weather experience, or pleasant weather experience was very much driving the
Mm.
geographic places I was looking to become an equine ambulatory doctor. And then, yeah, I was in BBMA when I was in vet school, and so I was being a good little BBMAer when I was like, let me reach out to all my contacts, and at the time, one of which was Jimmy with Live Oak Bank, and I had met him during vet school. They had started a little bank that was lending money to veterinarians, but his grandfather was one of the founding members of AEP and was actively practicing in Kentucky still. And so I was like, I'm just going to, I'm a shiny new equine vet.
Yeah.
Let me
Yeah.
reach out and just kind of touch base and see if they know anybody, looking for a
Right.
vet. And they also had a portfolio of veterinarians to also pull from. So it was just a good old networking email.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then that got a response back that said, well, this is going to sound a little crazy, but we're actually looking for a young veterinarian to go out on the road and represent the bank and teach people about business loans. And I was like, and you want me to do that?
I think you misread the email.
I
Equine
mean,
vet
I like you
seeks
guys. You're
equine.
fun. You're in Wilmington, North Carolina, on a beach town, and I was like, all right. I mean, I'll at least chat, And this was
Yeah.
before Zoom was like a thing, and so I was literally in the radiology room at the clinic with like the lights on, like FaceTiming.
Nice. Yeah.
And we had a great conversation. It was great catching up, and we've just been really good friends throughout vet school. Just one of those contacts that you stayed in touch with. And anyway, so he was like, "Hey, well, we'll fly you out for an interview." And before we hung up, I was like, I just, I don't know anything about business, right? Just to be clear, like I don't have an MBA. I'm not like business trained. And he was like, no, it's fine. We'll teach you. He's like, you can talk, you can public speak. That's the
Yeah.
biggest things. And I was like, all right, as long as the expectation is there. And
Right.
so we went and yeah, flew out, and leaving the Northwest and getting back in the South was, it was like, this feels like home. And
Yeah.
it's Wilmington, so it was gorgeous. It was like June, so it was just like perfect weather. You
Right.
know, went out, and I was just like, yeah. And I got back, and another clinic that I'd been very much vying for um, had finally called for like another round of interviews, and they actually offered me the Live Oak job while I was here, and I accepted it, and or we're negotiating. But I don't know, it was just I had this overwhelming feeling that like um I would regret it if I said no. And so
Yeah.
everybody thought I was crazy, especially like my mentors at the practice. They're like, "You want to work for a bank?" I was
Right.
like, yeah, but like a vet bank. I mean, I was still in
Right.
the profession. My parents, my family, everybody was just like, "You went to vet school and now you're going to work for a bank?" And I'm like,
Yeah.
"Well, but like, it's it's in the industry. Like, I'm not just like left turning completely."
Right.
Um, which I think a lot of people didn't fully understand that piece as well. And so it was weird, but I was like, you know what? It might only last 6 months. I might hate it, but at least I'll know. And I was like, I have a good
Right.
feeling about the people. I've always loved everybody I interacted with. They have a cool culture. I'll learn a little something about veterinary business if I want to own a practice one day. All of those things, it just seemed to check a lot of boxes. And at the end of the day, the gut feeling was there that I would regret it if I didn't. And so I
Yeah.
went for it. And
Gosh.
so,
And I mean, but yeah, and what a unique opportunity because like vet jobs one way or the other, right? Like to your point, in 6 months they're still going to be there. You're still going to know the information that you knew then. I mean, like this is a once in a lifetime, very unique thing. Like it would be kind of crazy, like especially in retrospect to say no.
yeah, I did it. And yeah, it was awesome. So.
Yeah, which is, which then goes back to like when you and I first met is then in that role. Like you took over for I was at that BBMA national event or conference or whatever, where he was like, "All right, and I'm out."
Yeah,
Jimmy out. And this is Jess.
basically.
You're just like, hi.
The torch was officially passed in Orlando that year.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh,
Yeah, so that must have been January. So I guess you were then, what, like 6 months ish or whatever on the job at that point.
mhm. Yeah,
That's that's so wild.
it was wild. It was wild.
Yeah, and then you and I like have our shared stories after that of just meeting at those random events, and I forget what it was, but I think it was like an avian. I'll probably end up maybe mentioning this in the intro, but like I love that it's like that day that you and I like actually met, where like truly actually sat down. We were in Tennessee, and I like taught an MCAT class, and I had an
Yeah,
avian exotics or whatever class like test the next day or multi-species or something, and I'm like, well, I could study because I need to and I know nothing, or I can go out to dinner because I missed the meeting. So I'm like, I guess we'll go out to dinner. So
yeah.
it's
Because
like
we had
one
gone
in the
out to dinner
morning.
after. I don't even
Yeah.
think. I think it was the night before. I don't think we had the meeting yet. I don't remember. I just remember we went out
Oh,
to dinner, and I remember your partner at the time being like, "You got to meet my fiance." And somewhere I missed the fact that you were actually a vet student. I was like,
Oh,
this is weird, but okay, whatever. I don't have anything else to do. And so I was like, all right. I mean, I'm in Knoxville. I don't have anybody else to hang out with, so sure.
right.
So
Yeah.
we were at that table, and I remember it was a big round table in the back,
Yes.
and then you finally showed up after your impact. I think that's why, like, it didn't occur to me that you were,
Sure. Why would it? Yeah.
yeah, and and so yeah, you showed up, and we obviously shut the place down, just chatting away. I don't even know what we were chatting about, but everything
Right.
related to all the things that we have in common. But and I remember, I don't know if it was raining or cold, but they like basically escorted us out of the restaurant. We
Right.
were
Yeah.
standing on the doorstep for like another 20 or 30 minutes, just like all of us just talking. And
Yeah,
so
that's right.
from that point on, we've been friends.
That's right.
And then my
Yeah.
next interaction. Do you remember what the next interaction was?
No, I assume it was. No, I don't.
It was when you applied. Well, it might have been.
No, we had like spoken a bunch, I think, between then, because I would have felt comfortable
Yeah,
enough.
that's true. Because you didn't show up till your first
So,
year.
right.
Okay, maybe the timeline on that. Because that was your
Yeah,
first
because I know
year.
that I've like since, because then I wrote like some blog post for like the VBMA group at Tennessee, and it was, I remember spending like too much time on it, and it was something along the lines of like, as the leaves fall and turn the color of Tennessee orange, or blah 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 blah. There was like
I do
this
remember that
whole
one.
this whole thing, and I like sent it to you, and you're like, okay. I see something's happening here.
That's true. Because I just
Like this.
the distinct like next memory was the rap video.
Right. Yeah.
I guess I
Yeah,
should
that's
explain
right.
that. So part of the externship experience that Matt applied for was that you could either um, write a like whatever personal, just like a letter, or of why you wanted to apply, or you could make a video, which most people sat in front of their computer and kind of explained who they were and why they wanted to be there, very much similar to this experience, like
Right. All right.
kind of thing. And then I opened Maps. And he has made a full on rap dance video as to why he wanted to do the Live Oak externship. I literally opened it. I was like crying, laughing in my office, and then literally proceeded to get everybody on my hallway to come and be like, look at this video we got. And everybody was like, that's amazing. And then I think when you finally got there, like everybody was like, you're the guy.
Yeah, that's right. Which you didn't let on till, because it was a 2 week thing, and like you somehow kept everyone quiet about the whole thing until like the last day, when you were like, "Oh, by the way, everyone knows who you are. Everyone's
Like
already
the
seen your
rest of the
video."
group to be like, because they didn't know. They didn't know that was your
Right.
video.
Yes.
I think you.
Yep.
I think you made them. I made you show it to everybody else.
Yeah, on the last day. Yeah, after they had like put up with me for 2 weeks, and they're like, "Oh, okay, this makes sense." This I do remember it having to be exactly, it was like, it has to be under 2 minutes. And I wrote this thing, and I forget, I had to like mess with the tempos or something to like get it to be exactly 2 minutes long. And so if you notice, like it cuts off almost like, I don't know, in the middle of something, because that is exactly when it turns over 2 minutes. I'm like, I am following the rules, but it didn't say I couldn't do a rap music video.
It was epic. Yeah, that was definitely, no other video got topped after that.
Right. Yeah, so then, of course, we've continued to talk and be friends. And I mean, obviously, like we talk about this all the time, but I'm glad to have your perspective on just you have like a totally different, vantage point on this industry. And I'm so curious about like, the education side and like the industry side, and how like the business part is doing. And so, one, just to have that vantage point, but then two, like to talk about it in terms of like, Hamilton, and like whenever I'm like, yeah, I want to write a rock opera, I know that you could be, I could tell you that, and you'd be like, oh yeah, that makes sense.
Totally works.
Everyone else would be like, right, exactly. Which I guess makes sense, like, being the person who, saw this weird, like, email back from Live Oak Bank and being like, "Yeah, I mean, this makes sense." So, you can see that thing that, like, may not necessarily be apparent on the surface, but that actually does make sense. So,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
appreciate
and
that
that's
about you.
I think that's actually why I struggle a little bit with medicine because it's so detail oriented, and I'm like very much a big picture like synthesizer kind of person, and
Right.
so I can connect these dots from like random places. Like when I take any of the strength
Right.
finders, like strategic thinking and learning and curiosity, those are all kind of things that idea land basically that definitely I gravitate
Right.
towards, and so sometimes medicine, which is like super nitty gritty, oftentimes
Sure.
I struggle with a little bit more than the like big picture concept things. So
Right.
that's definitely so it's been
I got
it's
an
been
idea.
fascinating.
What if the dog wasn't sick? How about that? Just hypothetically, if the kidneys were working appropriately.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of Marcus Buckingham's work. He's written several books, but he talks about finding the red threads, which is the things that do bring you joy and contentment and fulfillment. And I think the statistic is that like if 20% of the time you're doing something that kind of pulls on those red threads, you'll be happy and content at work. But you got to identify those things and you got to
Mm,
um, pursue them. And at one point, one of my internal training things I come across, we were kind of helping people kind of find their values, and there's the VIA, it's like values in action, and it's like a or questionnaire where it helps you identify what are your kind of values that you attributes about yourself and values that you want to align with. And one for me is like learning um, and education and strategic thinking. Those all the things. Like when I read mine, I was like, yep, nailed it. All those things. So finding those things, whether it's in practice or outside of practice. I will say that was another thing I realized. I was still at the bank, but I'd gotten off the road because for the first 5 years, I just traveled like a maniac. And so when I
mm-hmm.
was home, I was just like, cool, I want to sit on the couch with my dog,
Right.
watch
Yeah.
TV. I had a very
Right.
reverse life of like going out to dinner and taking people out to dinner all week and being very
Yeah.
social. And so I am a down the middle of the road ambivert of like, when I'm on, I'm on. And I can be super engaging, but then, especially traveling, what you didn't see was like, I'd go in, speak, go to dinner, do all those things, but then I'd have, a day of headphones and traveling, and I would like
Right.
barely nod at the lady checking me in,
Yes.
and the not talking aspect and the introverted side of it to recharge.
Oh, I wonder if that's why so like when I did the travel bit more, like where I would go to all these new hospitals and I'm like, "Hey, how's it going? I'm the new doctor," or whatever. Why do you talk like that? I don't know.
I have a
So
podcast.
whenever, yeah,
Or I have to have radio voice all the time.
that's that's what I would do. I would walk in. Hello, everybody. My name is Matt Asciuto. I'll be your doctor tonight. but I would like go in and I would be, pretty social, right? Because like that's the job, that's the gig.
Yeah,
But then I would go back to the hotel and that's it. It was just like my little like dark room sanctuary, and I would have no other interaction. Like I wouldn't
yeah,
go out to restaurants or like there's none. It was
yeah.
just like, all right, and I'm
Uber Eats,
working and I'm
good to
on
go.
and right,
Yeah.
exactly. Hmm.
So I found that to be, and it was a good balance. And it also, for me, the thing of like not being in an office and going to the same place every day, because actually the couple of years where I did do that pre-COVID, like I mentally wasn't doing great.
Oh,
Continuing to kind of show up like that didn't. I mean, the world kind of fell apart. And so I didn't
sure.
have to go back to the office every day, even though it was the best office in the world. It was the best food in the world. That
Right.
thing that of like, I always worried about in falling in medicine, I think was starting to affect me even there of showing up to the same place, 8 to 5, working day after day after day, just for some reason isn't in my DNA.
Hmm.
And it was starting to wear on me mentally. what I realized was vet school stripped me of my hobbies.
Mm,
Because once I got off the road, like, because you're just in it, it's the time commitment. You lose those things outside of yourself. Oftentimes, I think now they're doing a much better job of structuring school to be able to kind of keep the whole person intact. Um,
right.
but so I had to kind of stop and really. Oh, I'd been traveling, and then I got off the road and was working more like normal 40 hours a week at the office kind of thing, and not traveling. And then after a certain amount of time, like I realized on the weekends, like I didn't have anything to do, and I was
Yeah.
like, I have got to find something outside of work to live my life, because
Right.
work and school had always been the central thing, and that when you kind of get into that routine, you got to find your passions elsewhere, because at the end of the day, work is work, and it can't be your sole thing that drives you and fulfills you. There's a point where it is a strong percentage of what is consuming you, because you're learning the job, you're adjusting, you're becoming a doctor, you're whatever it may be. That learning aspect and that collaboration and connection and building the relationships, it is so time consuming. But at
Mm-hmm.
some point that kind of plateaus, and then you got to go look for it elsewhere and say, okay, what do I want the rest of my life to look like and be, and
Yeah.
outside of work, who am I outside of work, as well. And so I kind of, I do a lot of like writing in the morning. So I'm drinking my coffee just to like process things. It was literally like,
Yeah.
okay, what hobbies did I have before that school? Like, what did I do for fun? What do I like to do? What do I want to do? And
Yeah.
really had to like put a lot of effort into like figuring out hobbies again, and re-engaging. That's when I got re-involved back in horses, which obviously is taking on my whole lifestyle now. As I have moved to a farm, and that is multiple times a day caring for four-legged friends. But it's a huge piece of the work I did, and kind of looking at that. Those are things I derive joy from. So why wouldn't I
Mm,
do that? Why wouldn't I put an obnoxious amount of money relative to that? I'm like, so what in the scheme of the world? It doesn't make financial sense. If I can go do all the big fancy things I want and save and do all the things, but if like at the end of the day those things aren't fulfilling me, like I would
right.
rather have less
Yeah.
money in my bank account and derive joy from feeding animals twice a day and living this lifestyle than going on crazy vacations. But that answer is different from everybody for everybody. But there was another book I read that I had found.
I
Kind
got a
of
porch and a
again,
big library.
I do. That is one of my goals. I think this corner of the house, like what it's going to be, is like a library. It was Johann Hari and Lost Connections, and that when he kind of started looking at like, why are we all depressed, anxious all the time. And I read this and I was very depressed and anxious all the
Mm,
time. And but it kind of gave 9 different reasons as to like the disconnection from things, and that a lot of it is stemming from a lack of connection to purpose, to values, to nature, to each other, to meaningful work, and like really starting to find those areas in my life that I connect with those things, and the things that put me in a state that is connecting for me, which again, like vet school was for me in that way, connecting me to people with similar interests in the same way that the kind of re-engaging in the horse world. Like I've lived in Wilmington for several years, and outside of kind of my work family, I wasn't really connected to the community until I got into horses. And now, like, I feel like I have much more roots here, simply because I'm connected to people that have similar values, similar connections, similar interests. There's a
right.
connection that has been formed, and a community that has been built around the common interest, which for me was horses. That could be running for somebody else. That could be, a hobby, archery, or, whatever it may be for other
Yeah.
people. But finding that thing and those people that come with that thing, I think is an important aspect. as well as nature, just getting outside and connecting to the world outside in the bigger vast. It's so easy to get behind a screen, your little
Right.
screen on your phone, your middle screen of your
Sure.
computer, or your big screen of your TV,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it is addictive. And but at the end of the day, our brains are built to connect with the natural world too. And so, how are you getting outside and getting connected to the world? I think we've lost that as a
Mm.
human.
Yeah, for
I
sure.
think we are
Yeah.
underestimating how important that is as
Yeah.
a species for ourselves. And again, it was fascinating to me, and the purposeful work behind it too. Like, I had a house and I had a yard, and I hated working in my yard. But then once I got back into horses, and I would like go to somebody else, like when I was boarding, I would be at somebody else's barn. I'd be doing like manual labor, moving dirt around, doing stuff. And I was like, okay, so it's not like being outside, it's not the heat, it's not the work, it's the like reason behind the work that makes it. Like, if I'm
Mm-hmm.
making an ornamental shrub, it does nothing for me. But if I am, removing pine straw so my horse will have more grass to eat, like, then it suddenly becomes
Right.
meaningful. Even though it's
Mm.
basically doing the same thing, the meaning behind it
Right.
changes. And so kind of, again, deciding to buy this place or not, all of those kind of aspects were coming up, of being able to just get back into that and have that right at my disposal. And it was fascinating to me that, within weeks of moving to a little 5-acre farm with a great front porch, my horse, all the horses surrounding me and the dogs, like, how much of any of the mental issues I, was facing at the time, the anxiety or depression, just melted away, by kind of
Mm.
getting plugged into a lifestyle that was checking those boxes. Um,
But how many times did you have to sit down and like force yourself to make that list? Like, like these are the things that I'm missing. Like these are the hobbies. This is what I'm happy around. Like how many times did you have to actually sit down and say that to yourself before you took action on it?
I don't know. I know it was like at the beginning of the year because it was like a January. I tend to do that, I don't make a ton of like resolutions, but I do have a very reflective holiday season. I will
Mm.
attribute this very much to our family traditions in some ways. Christmas and New Year's tend to be a very like reflective time for me, kind of having been trained all those years. We had this like freedom and independence, and like, again, but just like so much time in nature to sit and reflect and think, hours to yourself, just staring out the woods or the river or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
to kind of unplug. Anyway, so
Yeah.
back to the hobbies thing. That was kind of one year was I was like, I really want to focus this year on getting connected and doing stuff. And so I kind of had a couple different buckets that I thought about. Obviously, horses was something that like I wanted to get back into, but that's not something you can do all the time, or it's kind of the availability of it. And then the other was like I wanted a activity that was an individual sport. It was active but not necessarily athletic. Like, I didn't necessarily have to come in just drenched in sweat, having had
Right.
done it,
Right.
or put on
Yes.
specialized, like, you gotta go put on tennis sneakers and then sports bra and da 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 da, the like athletic thing of like I could just go in the backyard and like do the thing, if I for
Right.
20 minutes or whatever. And so on that one, I actually landed on archery. And so I got
Hmm.
archery set up, and
Okay.
I started to shoot a bear bow, right, a recurve bear bow, and picked up that hobby. And then the other was like, all right, well, sometimes the weather's shit, so maybe do something for the rainy days when you don't want to do anything else. So I picked up art again, and I'd always done like pencil drawings and stuff. But I had always kind of wanted to learn how to paint, and so I picked up watercolor painting during that time. So
Hmm.
those are kind of
Hmm.
three that, again, they kind of fit those boxes of like, what are you doing in your spare time, and how is your spare time structured? I don't know. So it's just finding those things that kind of you derive joy from, both mentally, almost that meditative flow state. They talk a lot about that place of another book. Well, we need to make show notes with all the links to these things. The Daniel Pink book, Drive, when it talks about like kind of three key aspects of like, human behavior and drivers of motivation. The three are mastery, relatedness or connection, and growth, at least something like that. Something like that. Kind of this, I am getting better, I am mastering something, I'm doing something, I'm connected to other people, and I feel like I can achieve something. And so, kind of hitting those, and that flow state is that kind of that state where you just lose track of time, where you're so into something. It's not necessarily that something's easy, because honestly, that's actually like it's right at that threshold of your abilities, of like, oh, I want to master it, and so you're learning something new, and it's not necessarily easy. It's kind of hard, but you're just there, and you're present, and you're fully in that state. And so finding those moments of flow was a big piece for me, and that kind of just that focused energy. When you're in that state, like you generally are a pretty fulfilled kind of person when you're regularly engaging in those activities, which for me is being on the back of a horse, painting, being artistic. Turns out sweeping a barn now I found to be very meditative.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
And so finding those for yourself, I think, is an important. I'm sure music is a huge one for you, to get you in that kind of place where it's a happy place, but happy doesn't necessarily mean easy, or sometimes it's challenging. Like, but your brain is happy being in that challenging place.
Yeah. I mean, very specifically when it comes to music, for me, it is like when I'm playing, actually where I get the most frustrated and like disillusioned with music is when I'm playing something that's like easy and just naturally kind of flows out of my fingers. I'm like, another D, like, like C, D, G. I'm gonna throw a G in here. Great. But where it's like captivating and where you lose your time and somehow you're connected to something entirely outside of you is where there's something that's happening in the ether surrounding your guitar, and you're just finding the notes that come next, and they may not come easily, but you're like, it's right there. Yeah, like you're saying, it's just like right on the tip of something. And it's not, and like, sometimes there's buzzing, and like I'm technically not very good because I've never been here before, but that's where it's interesting, and that's where I do feel like the most at peace with the instrument, for sure.
And it's just a happy place for your brain to be.
Right. And it's a restorative place. Yeah, there's something that, and I find that the reason that I asked, like, how often you have to do that or had to do that is because, like, for me, I feel like I've done iterations of that over and over again, of like, what am I missing? Like, what did I lose, after vet school and during vet school, especially, but like in the interim too, I'm working all the time. It's like, what am I missing in my life that is making me feel in parts, rather than as a whole. And music keeps coming back on the list, like writing, creativity, things like that, but also like the sciences. I mean, I feel like I'm losing the sciences because, as it turns out, like most of what you do is practical day-to-day stuff and not necessarily like the nitty-gritty physiology stuff that is actually really interesting to me.
Interesting.
But I find that like I just come back over and over to the same things, but sometimes, it's not like my life is constantly in that, that state where I'm like, oh yeah, and then I'll spend a couple hours doing this and a couple hours doing this. Like, I'm just off balance. I'm like, what is wrong? Oh, I haven't like picked up an instrument for 2 months or something. So anyway, yeah, that's why I was just curious. Like,
is it too? Is like listening to yourself, like, wait, why am I in this state, and like, what's missing, and like, what gets me back there quickly, and the idea of like mental hygiene, of like, it's like you don't realize you've not brushed your teeth until your mouth is, disgusting. And then you're like, oh, okay, too long without brushing my teeth. Something happened today. And so it's kind of the same thing of mental hygiene, of like doing those things and regularly restoring those, and that, you don't appreciate how good they are for your well-being until you get out of balance and you're like, what was that thing I was missing? Oh, I haven't been outside,
Right.
or oh, I haven't done something
Yeah.
that's physically using my body to be strong or whatever that may be, and exerting yourself. And so,
Hmm.
not being ashamed to design your life in a way and take control of your life and prioritize those things, I think, and shape your career, not necessarily just having to be good at your job because you're a veterinarian, but taking that kind of control of your career to say, what do I want my life to look like, and how does being a veterinarian play into that? And what aspects of veterinary medicine do I, just like you in that music state, like find myself like excited and flow, and like I'm there and I'm zen. Like I feel like a lot of people that do dental get that way. Like they know that about themselves.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
there's something about that like again makes their brain happy. And so
Yeah.
finding those aspects of practice that you get lost in, looking up and researching and pursuing those, and not being afraid to become that person that everybody goes to for eye stuff or lameness stuff or kidney stuff or diabetes, like whatever it is. Like,
Yeah. I so first off, you and I have proved that we could talk all day long. So at some point, I'm just gonna have to stop.
yeah, we we went on a 20-something hour road trip that time, and like never stopped talking.
Yeah, exactly.
And you tried to
That's
teach me
right.
music, and I still don't get it.
You know what's funny? Okay, so I was actually just talking to because I had a conversation with a friend of mine, Jen, about like basically inner monologue. And I'm like, oh yeah, I don't really have one of those. Like I mostly pictures. And she's like, I'm sorry, what? And so like we talked about that for a while, and then we started talking about music because that's kind of how it started. Like she was saying, like, yeah, this song is my mom hates it because it's like it's very dirty or whatever. I'm like, I had no idea. It just seemed like a light and airy folk song to me. And I realized that I don't listen to lyrics. I
Yeah,
mostly, I have the picture of like the music.
right.
But yes, so I think and then I had the same, like, I continue this conversation with Lindsay, and it's like, we got into it more and more. And I think that that's it, is that when I listen to music, it's all pictures. It's
Yeah.
all visual all around me. I have no idea what the lyrics are because it's just another little melody line and all of that. So
I
maybe
distinctly
that's
remember you
where.
explaining that to me when we were going. Was it the Dells of like Wisconsin? Like we were in like this very snowy
Yeah,
thing.
we had just crossed over into Minnesota, I think. I
Yeah,
think it was like the
yeah, and
very
you were
southern bit of
trying to
Minnesota.
describe this to me, and I like again, like my inner monologue is basically a movie of pictures and like phrases and things that were said, and
Hmm.
like I distinctly remember this like I am trying to picture this. I was looking out the window, just like I don't see it. I don't see it. I do not see the music the way you see it. And I was
Right.
like, I was trying so hard.
I know. I know.
Didn't.
And we were listening to, it was Don't Think Twice, but it was a Chris Thiele, and I forget who was playing the piano, but it was a piano mandolin. That was the song that we were talking
Wait,
specifically about.
he's in Punch Brothers.
He is.
So for
He
those
is.
listening, if this makes it in the podcast, not that long, last time I actually saw Matt in person, he had just like randomly, like a month or two before, just texted me like, "Hey, you want to go to a concert on like October 13th or whatever? I don't even know what the date was." And I was like, "Yeah."
Yeah.
And that was it. That was the extent of the conversation. I didn't ask who. I didn't ask where. I just put it in my calendar as like concert with Matt that date, that
Yeah.
time.
Right. Right.
And then like shortly before, like people were like, I was like, "Yeah, I'm going to this concert," and they're like, "Oh, who is it?" Who it actually is. And finally, I texted you, and I'm like, "Who are you going to see?"
Right.
You told me the Punch Brothers, and that was one of the like coolest. I don't know, just like that was such a great musical experience. That theater, and they just like stand around this microphone, and like you could hear a pin drop for like 2 hours of just incredible music playing. So that was a
Yeah.
cool experience. But I trust
Yeah. They're
Matt with
so
his
fantastic.
musical prowess, so I didn't need to know who it was. I was just like, "Sure, we're going."
Which, which I do love. I love that explanation. We're like, I don't know. It doesn't really matter. I mean, I trust him. Like,
He's got a good taste in music. It's not gonna be bad.
yeah.
And it was just funny watching people
The
like melt down for me. Like, what do you mean you don't know what you're going to see? They're in Wilmington on this date.
How could you possibly go see live music if you don't understand or know what songs are going to be played?
Oh,
Maybe
the other
you
one that'll
discovered
melt
along the
people
way.
down is buying a one-way ticket to your trip and then being like, "Oh, when are you
Oh,
gonna go home?" Or like, when's your flight out?" And you're like, "I don't know, I hadn't booked it yet." And they're just like, "Right." Like, for you. And you're like, I mean, there's flights every day, multiple times a day that I could catch to get back home.
right.
But they will have an absolute meltdown for you.
That's amazing.
Where are you going to stay tonight? I don't know. I haven't booked a hotel yet. Wherever. I don't know if I'm going to be closer to this area of town or that area of town.
Right. Right. Although I will say that thought process backfired on me when we went to Michigan because like there were no hotels available in the state. Like I don't know what happened. It was later explained to me that maybe it was that there was like this big ice storm and then like
Oh,
power outages and so the
yeah.
hotels weren't booking. But like we needed to go to Kalamazoo, Michigan, and there was nothing. Like we tried Airbnbs and they're like, well, we can't
Yeah.
because whatever. And yeah, it was like the whole state. So we ended up staying in Lansing, Michigan, which was an hour and 20-minute drive, both from Detroit where we flew in and from the wedding. So like we we woke up, we went to the wedding, and people were like, oh, you want to go grab breakfast tomorrow? It's like, well, we're staying in Lansing. Like Lansing. Yeah. So as it turns out, not always will there be a hotel available.
Yeah. Yeah. I learned that when I
That happened.
moved from Seattle to here, actually, Wilmington. And we were in like North Dakota. And we were in, I think it was like Fargo. And so it was like a populated town anyway. And it was like a Wednesday. Same thing. Like, of course there'll be a hotel room. And like, I
Right.
called so many hotels or apps, everything was booked. And apparently, like, it was kind of when fracking was still going on quite a bit. And like during the week, like, they were like, "Oh no, this is a normal thing." And I was like, what do you
Oh.
mean? I was like, there has to be some giant event or concert happening. They're like, no, all the hotels are always booked like this during the week. And I was like, wow.
Wow. That's crazy.
Wow.
I
Yeah.
will say it did happen to me once where I went to the hotel. Like, so I went to work. So I flew into North Carolina. I got in my car. I drove to the grocery store because that's the first thing I do. And I sat in the parking
Yeah.
lot thinking, did I book a hotel? And so I like look at my Marriott app and like, as it turns out, no. So, and I was going to be there for like 10 nights or something. And I'm like, oh no. And so I looked and like none of the normal hotels had any availability because it's a long stretch. Yeah. So I ended up staying like quite a distance away that time, but I did find something. Thank goodness.
I've done that with a rental
Yeah.
car, like back when I was traveling all the time. And like I had
Oh
status
yeah.
where you just go get in the car, right? And so I
Right.
drive up to the little stand and they're like, "We're not seeing your name." And I was like, and in the back of my head, kind of same thought, like, did I book the car? And I like
Right.
looked at him and I was like, so is it quicker for me to book it on my app or for you? So I'm sitting in the car, in the station, like, booking the reservation.
Like the things in front of you, there's cars behind you.
Yeah, I don't think it was. Thankfully, I don't think there was anybody behind me. But yeah, I literally made the reservation for the car I was sitting in.
Oh my gosh.
In the station. Yeah. But I will say that was a great thing of having traveled for work. You become a whole different traveler when you've done business travel.
That's true. Yeah, I learned the national bit from you. I think when we went to Austin for the Veterinary Innovation Summit,
That's the one
we're
where we
like
got
wandering.
snow cones.
Yes, that is the one where we got snow.
I wrote a
Drove
check
by.
for a snow
They're like
cone
snow cones.
in a Sharpie.
That's
We drove by the snow cone stand. I was just like, I really want a snow cone. We like, you eat it back.
right. And I'm just like along for the ride because I'm like,
Yeah.
I have no earthly,
It's
and
like
it would never have
spring.
occurred to me to stop by and get a snow cone. And like we go in, yeah, you're right. And there's like cash on. You're like, do you take a check? They're like, sure, why not? Like 4 snow cones, memo snow cones. But yeah, we were like in the Austin airport walking through the parking garage and we're just like wandering and you're looking around because I know now your experience, which is like you're looking for the best car that's in the executive elite or whatever area, like the one that fits your jam. But me, I'm just like, where's the car? Like, are we looking for like C7? Like what? You
What do
just
we
like
want to
get
shop
in a
this week?
car. I'm just like, this one will do. And I'm like, oh, we're just going to get in the car. But yeah. But now I understand. When I went to, so that same trip, right? Like because the purpose of that concert was like, hey, as it turns out, the day that I have free to go pick up the surfboard that I bought on one coast happens to be when Punch Brothers in town. So I was driving that back, and I went to, and I did National, and I like did the same experience, but I rented a minivan. And I will say, if you ever have to move anything across the country, do it in a minivan, because those seats like went into the ground. It was so much room. I loaded in a drum set because I had to pick up all the stuff from Michigan, right? I had to load the drum set, like 8 guitars, just a desk. I mean, there was so much stuff, and I still had room.
Oh yeah,
it's fantastic. Yeah. National for the win. Continued in part 2.